Wednesday, May the 17th. Lake levels 916 3/4. It's actually came down about 6 inches today. They've had some floodgates open, and it come up about 2 feet since my fishing report from last week from all the recent rains. But the water temperature, it's pretty much 70 to mid 70s no matter where you're at on the lake. And I mean, the fishing, when you get cloudy, rainy days like we've had for the last 5 or 6 days, post-spawn fish on Table Rock, you know, the topwater bite can be awesome. I mean, they're not biting it everywhere. You got to work and move around to a lot of different places. But this, to me, is some of the best fishing when you get out there and throw a topwater around the different structures. You know, I'm throwing it around boat docks, some up in the spawning areas, some of it over timber, but kind of mixing it up between swim baits and topwater baits. And, you know, last week I said I thought the spawn was pretty well over with, which I believe it is, but there are still a few fish spawning. Actually, a lot of the spawning pockets that we were fishing in a couple weeks ago, catching them on like split shots and drop shots, little Ned rigs, seemed to be getting worse and worse as the fish got done spawning. But the last 3-4 days, I'm finding that bite's coming back on again, you know, back in the spawning pockets where you can catch them on a fluke, or, you know, a fluke style bait. You can catch them on wacky rigged Cincos. You can catch them on a Texas rigged Cinco. And I've also seen some new beds that 2 or 3 days ago, there wasn't any water up there where the beds are. So there's definitely new ones coming in. But I think the majority of them are done. Most all the topwater fish we're catching are post-spawn fish. And we got into a bunch of spotted bass today that hadn't spawned. And they were 6 to 8 foot deep on main lake gravel points. You know, a lot of times them spots, they won't go back into creeks, into coves. They'll spawn right out there on the main lake, you know, on the gravel. And depends on the water clarity. I was fishing the mid-James today, so it, you know, it had some stain. It was off-colored. But there's still a lot of the spots that I think are spawning right now. But, you know, with that being said, there's just fish are in all 3 phases. There's a lot of different ways to catch them. The topwater fish, you know, some days it's over with at 10 o'clock, you know, even though it stays cloudy throughout the day. But you want to keep one handy. Some of the fish we're seeing surface, chasing shad. And what's really good about I've got a LiveScope mount on my, for my LiveScope transducer. You can see it off the trolling motor where I can move it independently. Instead of moving the trolling motor, I can spot lock down and then I can scan. So I guess what I'm getting at is when you got fish blowing up, that are chasing shad, and all of a sudden you see the fish over here and they're gone, well, you can just take that LiveScope and on that LiveScope mount and scan around to see what direction you need to be casting. You can either see the bait, you can see the fish, and on that Garmin LiveScope you can actually see the topwater bait, and a lot of times you'll see the fish, you know, come up for it. But where it's really helpful is when you're getting around a deep dock or in the trees. Instead of making a million different casts, you can kind of scan out and try to be casting over where the bait is or over where you see some of the fish, so you can get a little bit more productive cast. But as far as on the Finesse style baits, I mean, we're catching them on a lot of different baits. I've had the same guys for the past week, and they like to throw a centipede a lot. And what they've been doing is just Texas rigging it on 8-pound line with a 3/16 ounce bullet weight. Now you can do the same thing with a little split shot, you know, miniature Carolina rig. You can throw it on a shaky head. But the Finesse style baits in the spawning pockets and in the areas where I think a lot of the fish are still spawning on them gravel points, a little 4-inch worm is really working good. How I fish it a lot is this is a big bite, little 4-inch Finesse worm. It's a Somali, but I'm fishing it on a drop shot, either in, you know, an 1/8 ounce or a 3/16 ounce weight. And if there is some moss in the area, it's keeping the moss off the bait, and just picking the moss up on the bait, on the weight, not the bait. But like I said, there's a lot of different ways you catch them on small jigs, finesse jigs, on them spawning fish. I've been out there looking for some of the structure fish out deeper. I think the James River, there's more fish that got through spawning earlier, and they're starting to get out there on them long run outs, and not so much ledges, but points that come way out and got drop offs where you can start to catch them on a football jig. I'm catching a few on a deep diving crankbait, but a lot of the fish are still more relating to shad. So what I'm looking for when I go up in the river is the big schools of shad and fishing swim baits underneath them. And the bigger swim baits seem to be working a little bit better for me. Like, if I don't want the bait to go too deep, I'll throw a mag draft where it has, little to no weight. But I'm throwing, 6 and 7 inch swim baits. Now this is a suicide shad, big bite. This is a mega bass mag draft. Both of these two baits will only drop down, they'll drop as far as you let them, but they fall real slow. So you can do a constant retrieve and only let the bait get down 2 or 3 feet. Now that works good like up around the boat docks, up around the timber when the fish are suspended up higher. If you want to bait the swim bait to go down a little deeper, you can either use a swim bait head, or I've been using a 5 and a 6 inch. It's a line through swim bait. Basically, it's got about a ½ ounce weight built into it. Now this one, when you cast it out, give it a few seconds, it'll get down and stay down at about 10 feet. If I want it to go down a little bit deeper, I'll just stop reeling and let it drop. But I can get it, if the fish are down there deeper, I can get it more into their strike zone. If they're up higher in the water column, I'll throw one that has little to no weight and almost fish it like a glide bait. And I know there's a lot of fish being caught on a glide bait. I throw a bigger swim bait, a lot more than a glide. But there's been some really big bags of fish coming in. I mean, there was like 3 bags over 20 pounds this past weekend. I think it took 23 pounds to win. Now, a lot of the fish that we're catching out there on the finesse baits, I mean, we're catching a lot of keepers, and they're averaging 2.25 pounds. The ones that are spawned out in the pockets that are, like I call them fry garters, or, garden eggs, those are pretty lean because they haven't got a chance to feed back up after this spawn. But the ones out on the main lake points, some of them that are still coming in are pretty chunked up, and there's a lot of good 2.5 pound spots. And the smallmouths is kind of a mystery to me. Normally this time of year, you can go out and catch, 20, 30 smallmouth a day. Well, they're starting to get out there on some of them flat gravel points, but to me, they're not out there as plentiful as they normally are. It seemed like the first wave of the spawn happened so fast. I don't know if them fish have already moved out to deep water. If they are, I haven't been able to find them. I think we've still got a good smallmouth bite in that 10 to 20 foot range that hopefully will be coming in the next couple weeks. It usually lasts up into the 1st of June. So I'm thinking they just haven't get out there yet on that gravel after they've spawned. There's a few out there, but not like there normally is. And we'll catch them on small jigs, swim baits, spy baits, topwater early, just all depends. Now, one of the keys to the topwater bite for me, it seems like there has to be bait fish, not a lot of shad. I think for the most part, the shad spawn is about over. I haven't seen the shad going crazy the last 3 or 4 days up around the docks and the timber, but it seems like wherever I'm getting bit on a topwater, there is some isolated shad either over the treetops or in the areas where I'm throwing the topwater bait. Back in the pockets, you'll see a lot of little bass fry still. And like I say, that bite had been slowing up, but it seems to be picking back up again because I think there's more back in there spawning. So, there's a lot of different things going on. You don't have to get out there real deep. The majority of everything that we've caught in in the past week, it's been, 12 to 15 foot or less, other than some of the topwater fish that have been out over deep water and the swimbait fish. They may be out over 30, 40 feet of water, but they've only been from the surface down to about 15 foot. So it's a great time to get out there and do some fishing. Looks like the weather's going to be nice for the next week, maybe one day of rain. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.